I now present this wonderful meditation.
Buenos días. Muchísimas gracias por invitarnos a compartir nuestra cultura. Vamos a hacer una pequeña meditación con un ofrecimiento que es representado por el fuego. Les vamos a ofrecer y agradecer el estar aquí, el estar en este lugar, en este maravilloso, con esta maravillosa laguna. Vamos a dar gracias por todo esto y gracias por estar también con ustedes. Vamos a hacer un saludo a los 4 rumbos.
Good morning. We are very glad to be here. It's very important for us to salute to you with the fire because it's an energy. What we are going to do is we are going to salute to the 4 points. Thank you.
Vamos a saludar y vamos a nombrar 4 esencias que representan los 4 puntos cardinales.
We are going to salute the 4 essence that represent north, south, east, west.
Hacemos el permiso a estas esencias, no dioses, mal llamados dioses, mal interpretados por nuestros conquistadores, pero son esencias, son energías.
Lourdes tells us that we are going to salute this essence. They are not gods, they are essence.
Les voy a pedir por favor que se pongan de pie para hacer la ofrenda y el saludo.
We please ask you to stand up and so we are going to make the salutation. This is going to be the meditation that we offer to you.
Vamos a saludar al oriente en representación Quetzalcóatl.
We are going to salute to the Oriente, Quetzalcóatl.
Es sabiduría. El sur, Huitzilopochtli, representando la fuerza de voluntad.
We are going to salute
Huitzilopochtli.
Huitzilopochtli.
Poniente representa el lugar de la mujer, lugar de transformación, y su representante es Chipetotes.
Chipetote, transformation, the energy of transformation within us and around the world.
El norte, representado por Tezcatlipoca, la conciencia, el despertar de la conciencia, el lugar del reposo. Estamos saludando a nuestros hermanos de raza blanca.
Tezcatlipoca, the energy of awareness, of consciousness.
Saludamos al cosmos, representada por Shuktekutsi, energía cósmica que se genera también en nosotros mismos.
Now we are going to salute to Chuktekutsun, the giver of life. It's in the sky.
Agradecemos a la tierra, Huatlicuetzi.
We say thanks to the Mother Earth, Huatlicuetzi, our planet Earth, and her magnificent dance around the sun.
Pueden sentar, muchísimas gracias. Tengan un bonito día.
Yahweh, Yahweh. Please be seated and thank you very much.
That was really wonderful. Thank you. We've never seen anything quite like it. Be very careful down these steps. Dr. Manuel Aguilar Moreno was born in Guadalajara, Mexico. In 1997, he completed his studies for a master's degree in Latin American Studies at the University of Texas in Austin. And then in 1999, received an interdisciplinary PhD in art history and anthropology. He is author of numerous books, among them The Cult of the Dead in Mexico, Continuity of a Millennial Tradition, The Perfection of Silence, The Cult of Death in Mexico, and the Cemetery of Belen, Ulama, Handbook to Life in the Aztec World, and Diego Rivera, a biography. He's also written countless articles in books, journals, magazines, and newspapers. Dr. Aguilar is frequently invited to present slideshows and lectures on the history of Mexican art as well as world art in the US, Mexico, and Europe. He's had several appearances as an expert on the History Channel and National Geographic. We're truly fortunate to have Professor Aguilar talk to us today about the Maya culture, the hieroglyphs in 2012. Let's welcome Dr. Aguilar.
One, two, three. Can you hear me well? Yes? Okay, thank you. Because here the sound looks weird here, but as long as you hear well there, it's fine. First of all, I want to thank Margaret Van Every for inviting me, or for daring to invite me again, to be with you again. And I have seen some familiar faces here, and I know there is also new people from my last year that I came. But it's a pleasure for me, and I appreciate and admire that you have a group like this with the interest in culture and in human growth and in knowing more about our culture here in Mexico. Last time I spoke about the Mexican muralism, Diego Rivera, Orozco, Siqueiros. Today we are going back a few centuries in the past to speak about the Maya culture of Mexico. I will explain, the lecture will have basically two parts. One that will be to speak about the culture itself, a little bit of the art and thinking of the Maya, and then we will go into one aspect that is fascinating and is very recent, that was the decipherment of the Maya writing. I had the opportunity to study in the University of Texas at Austin with Dr. Linda Chile, who was one of the main decipherers of the Maya hieroglyphs. So then, for me, every time I speak on this topic, I dedicate the lecture to my late teacher, my late mentor, Linda Chile, who devoted her life. She worked 18 hours a day to advance more the knowledge in these areas. So we all, her students, have and feel the commitment to continue disseminating this knowledge that she gave us. It's like a charter, like a mission. Here is the mother with us of one of my classmates in UT Austin, who also studied with Dr. Chile. So it's very nice to have say hi to her today, Señora Villela. Okay, the Mayas is probably the most fascinating culture of ancient Mexico. It was one of the most refined cultures in terms of material development, architecture, astronomy, mathematics, writing systems, art, social organization, the practice of the ball game, and a society that basically has its own urban organization with cities that work in their own time, but with the same type of advancements we have today. They have drainage systems, sewage systems in their cities. So it was an organization that was very, very workable for the time. The Mayas have been studied very deeply and very consistently since about 1830, 1840. And for many years, the Mayas were a mystery for us. Before 1830, 1840, people saw some cities lost in the jungles of southern Mexico, and there were all type of interpretations about trying to think and to imagine who built those cities, who was the people who built those cities, and there were a lot of theories about it. Theories from thinking that there were giants, that there were UFOs, no? Extraterrestrials who came and built those pyramids, and at the same time they were doing building of other pyramids and other constructions in other parts of the world. There were people who tried to find connection between the Mayas and the Egyptians. So there were a lot of different interpretations. But in the 150 years of more scientific and more consistent study, we have come closer to the Maya. We have understood them more, especially after the 70s when the Maya writing was more understood. Because now we can know who they were told by themselves, not by our own speculations, that we can listen to their stories. So I'm going to speak about all these aspects today, hoping that it will be something enriching and stimulating for you. The Mayas were never an empire. We are accustomed to think in pre-Columbian peoples like empires that control different areas of land. During the pre-Columbian history, we had different types of empires. We had Teotihuacan, we had the Toltec Empire of Tula, we had the Mexica Aztec Empire of Tenochtitlan, what today is Mexico City. But the Mayas were not organized that way, even though at the beginning, in the turn of the 20th century, many of the archaeologists tried to think that the Mayas had this type of political system similar to the Aztecs and others. But we know now that the Mayas were independent city-states, more like the Greeks, who had the rulers, who were, every city was like a country, like a state, independently, and they made alliances with other cities depending in economic or political convenience. For example, when one single city became too big and too strong, other 2 or 3 cities got together to fight against that city and destroy it. So that situation maintained a balance of power that lasted for 800 years. They were powerful enough, but only in a local area, in a local arena. There was never a city that could control many other cities. 1 or 2 other cities they could control the most, but never in an extension that was enough to form empires. It was, you can imagine, like a constant competition for power all the time. There has been also, you probably, I am sure many of you have been in the Maya area in southern Mexico, in Yucatan, in Chiapas, and we have heard about the so-called disappearance or collapse of the Maya. We need to explain this very carefully before going into other topics, because there was no disappearance. Because we have several million Maya people living in Mexico today, and another several millions living in Guatemala, Belize, even Honduras and part of El Salvador. We have Maya people. So that those Maya people they don't come out of the blue. So there is no disappearance. Otherwise, if there would be a disappearance, there wouldn't be Mayas today. So what happened really? The ancient classic Maya, we have 3 periods in Mesoamerica. The pre-classic period is the period dominated by the Olmec culture, that is the oldest culture in Mesoamerica. Then we have what we know as the classic period that goes from 200 to 900 AD. And we have 3 main civilizations that dominated that period. Teotihuacan in central Mexico, Oaxaca in southern Mexico, that was the people called Zapotecs, the Zapotec people of a city called Montealban in southern Mexico, today Oaxaca, And we have the Maya people who live between the state of Tabasco and Chiapas and El Salvador, very large portion of the southern part of Mesoamerica. So these three people were the people of the Classic. Then we had the last period, last pre-Columbian period called post-Classic, from 900 to 1521, that was the year of the Spanish conquest. And then in that post-Classic, we have peoples like the Mixtecs from Oaxaca, the Totonacs and Huastecs in Veracruz. We have the Aztec Empire, all the Mexica Aztec people of central Mexico, who control a big portion of Mesoamerica. And we also had Mayas, but we call them post-classic Mayas to distinguish them from the classic Maya people. Why we make this distinction is important. When the Spaniards came, they met Mayas who were alive, and they were living in their cities with pyramids and platforms and plazas. But the Spaniards realized that there were a lot of Maya cities that were abandoned in the jungle, that were not occupied anymore. Those Maya cities were the cities of the Classic period that were abandoned on purpose by the Mayas at approximately the year 900 AD. It took us many years for archaeology to more or less figure out what happened. Why the very flourishing Maya culture that extended from 200 AD to 900 AD, why suddenly they stopped living in their cities, they abandoned their cities, and left and moved to another part of the jungle. That is what we call the Maya collapse. No Maya disappearance. Because the other Mayas that the Spaniards met were descendants of that collapse. There is not a single cause for that process, that social or political collapse, but a combination of causes, of reasons. The Mayas of that time, and it's the system that in many parts of Latin America still people use to plant, is the system called slash and burn. So you cut trees, you cut part of your forest, you burn the trees and the branches and all the organic material you cut from the trees, you burn it and you produce a soil that is rich in nutrients, that is very good for planting. So after they do that, let's say, for example, I take this piece of land here, that is the stage, and I have, let's say, a village of 500 people. So I say, okay, I will plant my cornfields in this plot. I destroy it. The area where the Mayas lived was a very dense forest. So they destroy these portions of the forest to create cornfields. So then, once they planted, they have a harvest to feed the 500 people of my village. Next year, I do the same. I come to the plot, put my corn again, develop it, harvest it, and my people will be eating. But this plot of land can be only used for about 4 or 5 years because the nutrients get exhausted. So I need, after 4 years, I need to go to another portion of the forest, deforest, destroy another portion, and allow this plot to rest and recover. So then I plant in this other side, do another 4 or 5 years of harvest with this corn that I planted here. I give food to my 500 people. After 5 years, this plot is going to be exhausted. Then I come back here because this other plot is ready again. Okay? So we have this cyclical process of slash and burn, and that worked for hundreds of years without a problem. But what happens if my population increases? It won't be enough, a plot of this size. I will need to make bigger plots or even several plots to feed an increasing population. what happens if I have a drought? Then there will be a failure in my harvest, and that will mean that many people of my village is going to die. Okay? So this system of planting slash and burn at some point began to have constraints and was insufficient. Because as more you destroy the forest, more probabilities of bringing droughts you have. You see, everything is an ecosystem that is in perfect balance. Once you break that balance, you destroy yourself. And that's exactly what we are doing with the world now. Scientists say the next World War will be not for oil. It will be, we will fight for getting water. We were going to fight for the possession of water around the world. So it's a problem that these people have in their own local system. Together with that, when there were food shortages and the people who control the politics, the rulers, were unable to appease the gods and bring the benefits of the gods to their people, then people began to rebel. So there were social rebellions against the system. And at some point, those rebellions destroyed the political system and the rulers, and the people the people abandoned the cities that were constructed by those elites and those rulers, who were the ones who had the know-how to how operate those cities. So the peasants, the rebels, dispersed in the jungle, and they started again from zero. So when the Spaniards came in 1521, the Mayas that they met were in less material and intellectual advance than the cities that have been abandoned. If we compare archaeologically the settlements built in the post-classic by the Mayas and the settlements built in the classic, we can see a tremendous distinction in the quality of all the different developments in life that they had. So that is, there are books of this thickness that explain you all this, what I am telling you in a few minutes. But of course, I am trying to simplify a little bit, but this is basically the reason of why that collapse happened. And these people went into the jungle and started over again. We are going to study the classic Maya culture mainly today. The Mayas excelled in basically all areas of culture. They produced amazing ceramics, polychrome. In these ceramics, as you can see here, there are stories. This is a story of a military scene. You have a warrior bringing a captive here into another ruler or another superior warrior. This is the name of the captive here. You see, these are glyphs, these are hieroglyphs. And here is telling us the story of what happened and in what city, the city of Calakmul. This is the ruler of Calakmul, and this is telling us the story that this is a captive being brought to the king of Calakmul. So, before the knowledge of the Maya writing, I would just come here to give you a lecture, and I will tell you, beautiful Maya base, everybody saw it? Yes, okay, next one. But now I can tell a little bit of what the narrative says, because we can understand the writing, we can understand the indicators that they give us. The ceramics in the Maya world basically are of two types. One that talks about historical events in the life of rulers, and the others speak about gods, religion. And the Maya artists were so advanced, individually advanced, that in many cases they left their signatures in the pots they made. This is something very strange, because normally in that type of cultures of that period, authors or artists were anonymous. It didn't matter who made it, because the idea was to glorify the gods or the rulers, not the artists who made it. This is a more Western culture, the fact that the artist wants to defend his or her individuality and say, I did it, look, I did it, that's my signature. And if it says Picasso, it will cost $10 million. If it says Aguilar, it will cost $1, you know? But if it says Picasso, it will be $1 or $10 million, you see? So the signature matters. Here in these cultures, everything was to glorify rulers or gods. But the Maya artists had an individual consciousness of themselves that they signed their pieces. And they even told you for what uses was made that piece. Sometimes you find inscriptions that tell you, this is a pot for chocolate. So then we can even know, told by them, how to use the thing. And not use it for milk or for water, it's for chocolate. Okay? So it's amazing, and look at the quality of these works. The figurines, they made from miniature, made in clay, to limestone, bigger and more complex iconographies. This is a miniature, probably about 10-15 centimeters in size, like this, and of a ball player. The ball game is one of the activities that were ritual. They were not sports. It looks like a sport, but it was a ritual that symbolized the movement of the sun. The ball represented the sun, and the individuals who needed to keep the sun ongoing to preserve the life. At the present, I am studying the ulama, that is the survival of the Mesoamerican ball game that is still played in northern Mexico, in Sinaloa. We have been studying this for 9 years with a group of my graduate students, and we are very close to finish the manuscript to send it at the end of this year to a university press. So I hope in another occasion that I can bring you the book. But that is the survival of this game, that you can see this guy dressed in the attire of the ball player. This is an image of a ruler. This is more or less how Maya kings or Maya rulers of those city-states were dressed. And everything is made with the pastillaje technique, that is making small pieces and adding them together to make these figures. So these figures are not made with molds, because the pre-Columbian people knew how to make ceramics with molds and make more multiple things or individual figures. These ones are made by hand and putting the different. They made a leg and attach it to the body, and this is what we call pastillaje. Very, very complex, and that produces unique pieces. That's why these type of figurines, they are called Jaina figurines, because they are basically museum pieces. Very difficult to find. There are some private collectors who have those, but are extremely expensive because of the uniqueness they have. And they are in many museums of the world, you can find them. This Jaina figurine is amazing. This represents a fertility goddess with the death god. And you can see the lascivious old man putting his hand in the leg. Can you see that? So the Maya artist is giving us all details. Look, so what is going on here? No? It's a very beautiful love scene between these two gods, no? And the very, very assertive and self-assured face of the old god is very nice, no? Like this, and here. It's beautiful. You can see the expression that these artistic pieces have, and this is in the Art Institute of Detroit. No? It's kept there for those of you that have been there or have seen it. This is the Maya area, the Yucatan, Tabasco, Chiapas, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. So all this very extensive area was inhabited by these city-states of the Maya that we have discussed. These big dots that we see here are the main cities that have been rescued and studied archaeologically. But if you have sons or grandsons who want to be archaeologists, tell them that there is going to be work, don't worry. Because, you know, the United States have some of the best archaeology schools in the world, but most of the sites to study are here, or in Guatemala, or in Egypt, and other places. And people sometimes think that almost everything has been explored, so there is not going to be jobs for new archaeologists. No. We have, besides the big cities that you see here, in all these other areas, there are hidden cities under the jungle. There are about at least 500 more Maya cities that are hidden here. So there is chance for UPenn and UT Austin and all those places to come and do excavations here. You know? So then there is still a lot to do, a lot to know about this culture, but we already, our knowledge of the Mayas is increasing more and more. This is the political map, so you can see the boundaries. You can see that we have highlands and we have lowlands. Of course, living in lowlands or highlands produce a difference. The most developed cities were the ones of the lowlands. Life was relatively easier than in the highlands. Because the Mayas were city-states, they were not a fully unified culture. They were not an empire who adopted standardization of everything. The Mayas had 9 different architectural styles. So within the Maya, we find 31 different languages and 9 different architectural styles. They believe in the same religion, they have more or less the same gods, but in some cities, certain god was more important than that same god in other cities. But they follow the same system of deities. The writing system that was mainly utilized by the elites is very interesting because you would expect that every city would have a different writing system. No. Even though they feel themselves different, they created certain elements of their life who were unified. They're probably the elites of different groups, Maya groups, came to an agreement and they chose one Maya language to be the language of the writing. Like Latin for Western Europe during many years, you know. All the priests of the Catholic Church spoke Latin and celebrated the masses in Latin and all the books were in Latin. So it was the lingua franca of the Catholic religion for hundreds of years in Europe. Well, these individuals decided to have a lingua franca so everybody could read the hieroglyphs from one city to the other, even though the people spoke different languages. Because in Maya languages, having 31 languages, some languages can be understandable between people, but there are some Maya languages that you don't understand a word because they have developed different words and sounds. It's more or less what happened with the Romance languages. For example, if you bring a Portuguese person here, and I speak in Spanish slow, they will understand me perfectly. And if they speak slow, I can understand them. If you bring a French person here, even if they speak slow, I probably won't understand what they say. I can get words. Why? Because French is the least Romance of the Romance languages. It has mixing with Germanic words. And also the pronunciation of French is so different to the rest of the Romance languages. If I see French written, I can understand most of it. But spoken, very difficult. And it's a language that comes from Latin, like Spanish or Portuguese or Italian. You see? So in the case of the Mayas, it's the same idea. So I am not going to go into all this detail today. I just want to tell you that we have different styles. For example, the Petén style that happens in northern Guatemala, in what we call the Petén jungle. Cities like Tikal, Oxaptum, Cobá, Lamanay, Xunantunich are cities that belong to this style. Rio Motagua style, we have people, cities like Copan, Quiriguá. In Quiriguá, there is an inscription that has to do with the so-called 2012. I will reserve that comment until the end. And one of your friends here told me, who was in my lecture last year, Javier, told me, did you bring the airplane to take us, all of us, out of here because the end of the world is coming? I said, yes, the airplane is out there. I hope you get ready. I don't know if everybody's going to fit, but we can try, because we only have 5 days to leave. December 21st, so this lecture comes in the right time. But we will talk closer to the end to that. No? But there is an inscription that has to do with that in the city of Quiriguá. In fact, there are only like 3 or 4 Maya sites, no more, that make a reference to this 2012 thing. Okay? And we have also the area of Usumacinta that is in Chiapas, southern Mexico, places like Yaxchilán, Bonampak, Piedras Negras, Toliná. The city of Palenque, that is a derivation of Usumacinta, but is so unique, this city, that it became a style in itself. Palenque is probably my personal favorite site among the Maya. You know, art is subjective. In art, when we speak about art, or architecture, or social sciences, 2 plus 2 equals 4, or 2 plus 2 equals 7 can be good answers, can be fine. If I do that in mathematics, they will send me back to grammar school again, no? But in human-oriented disciplines, 2 plus 2 equals 20 can be a right answer, because everything is subjective, everything depends on the perceptions of individuals. So, I may love Palenque, but any of you may say, no, I prefer Chichen Itza, or I prefer Picado. It's part of this subjectivity. We have other 3 styles of the Yucatan Peninsula: Riobec, Chenes, and Puc. We also have, this is the classic period, so they developed these 7 styles between 200 and 900. In the post-classic period, they developed these Mayas who were recovering from the collapse, created other 2 styles, one called Maya Tolteca, or Maya Toltec, like the ones you can see in Chichen Itza and Mayapan, because they have influence from the Toltecs of central Mexico, who migrated into the south, and they mix with the Mayas, and you find architecture that is Toltec, that is not Maya, or sometimes a mix of the 2 architectures. And there is also a style called Costa Oriental, or Eastern Coast, like Tulum and Cozumel. Many of you, I would imagine, have been in Tulum, that beautiful site that is in the seaside, on the coast of the Caribbean. But the architecture of that site is much more military oriented, it's not as refined. It's more a defensive type of city. So you can see the developments of this period are never as sophisticated or as artistically oriented like the ones of the previous period. This is an example of the Petén style. It's a very vertical style. The highest pyramids in the American continent belong to this style. The highest pyramid in the American continent is temple number 4 of Tikal. So it's a Mayan pyramid. They are very vertical. The cities, they are made, you have the pyramid here, and you have the temple here. So the temple normally is the only protruding part above the top of the trees. And that's on purpose, because once the priest goes up, he disappears and people don't see him anymore until he comes out of the temple. It's the only thing that is beyond the top of the trees. So that produces in the viewer the idea that the humans are ascending into the realm of the gods, into the sky. They make pacts and exchange information with the gods, and they come back to bring those benefits to the earth. So then this idea of verticality is human beings going into meeting the gods in the sky. And this is the characteristic of the Peten style. You can see different types. This is the funerary urn made of jade. It's a beautiful piece of jade, this urn, that contained the ashes of the king Hassan Kankabil. We can even know today the names of the kings because they are written, their descriptions. It's very interesting. When the University of Pennsylvania that excavated the Cal for 20 years, when they found the tomb of this king that was found exactly underneath this pyramid here, 1962, they didn't know how to read hieroglyphs then. So they call it ruler A, letter A. And then, when they began to investigate, they found next to this urn a little pot with a kind of a black dirt. And William Cole said, this looks like chocolate, like cacao. They came from University of Pennsylvania. They got the sample of cacao and sent it to Hershey Corporation in Pennsylvania. And very easy, it was kind of a brotherhood thing. They sent Hershey Corporation, analyzed, and they told them, yes, this is cacao. So this pot was used for cacao, for chocolate. So they changed the name of ruler A for Cacao. He, the one of chocolate. That still was a patch, because we still didn't know how he called himself. From ruler A, he became the chocolate eater. And in 1976, after we could read the glyphs, they found the name that was Hassan Kankawil. So you will find books in which he's still called ruler A or Cacao. Now you know that those books are old, okay? Because we have advanced into the knowledge of the identity of this guy. This is the temple too, built for the wife of Hassan Kankawil in the same central plaza of Tikal. This is another site called Coban, relatively near from Tulum and Cancun. You can see what I was telling you. In the density of the jungle, only the topmost part of the temples come out. So the priests are in the realm of these gods. People cannot see them anymore. They cannot see people who is around here. This is the Nohochmul, that is this pyramid, a life-threatening pyramid to climb. You can see how eroded it is. This is what you see when you are climbing. You have a rope. The scary thing is never to climb a pyramid, is to going back, to descend. Because in the descent, when you go up, you see the stairs. You say, okay, very easy, just do this. No? But when you come back, you see this. So the stairs become a ramp. And you become dizzy. How the hell am I going to go there? Then sometimes many people descend sitting with the path, no? Because it's a dangerous thing. Look, but it's an amazing experience. And this is another building. All these sub-vertical buildings are Peten style. This is a ball court that was utilized in all the Maya area. Some of the ball courts have rings, and some others don't, because there were varieties of the game. And the players play in this alley. In the other side, there is another slope, a wall like this here. So then they can play back and forth, utilizing the walls to bouncing the ball into the center. So that's Margaret told me that she saw in the National Geographic, my program, where I appeared explaining the ball game, and even making latex balls, because one of the big problems for today's survival of the game is the lack of latex balls, because it's a very complicated process. So we were doing part of our research how to try to recover that process and make it more easy to make and cheaper, so we can produce balls that will maintain the game for years to come. This is the new river in Belize. We are going to Lamanai. Lamanai is another beautiful site with this type of vertical pyramids that typical of the Beten style. In some of the previous structures, they have found these masks made of stucco with representations of gods. Most of the time, air goddesses or the sun gods are the ones who appear in those masks. This is the ball court in Lamanai. You can see it's a little bit, the slope is different, but it's the same idea. We have a corridor in the center and the sloping walls in the sides. This is Xunantunich, another Maya site. There are still some remains of the stucco. Some of these are faces of the god Chak, the god of rain, who was the most important god, because they depended on the seasonal rain to survive. So we have some of these. This is a view of the lowlands of Belize. This is the Rio Motagua style. This is the ball court in Copan, one of the most refined cities. Copan is called the Athens of the Mayas because it was so refined. We can see the ball court that has these markers in the shape of Macau heads. And we have this structure here called Temple 11, that is, it has a staircase here, that is this one. All the staircase has inscriptions. There are 3,000 inscriptions here in this staircase. This is the longest recorded text in hieroglyphs in the Maya area. At the turn of the century, there was an institution called the Carnegie Institution of Washington, who brought two very famous archaeologists called Eric Thompson and Sylvanus Morley, who were legends of Maya research. But these two archaeologists thought, as good as they were and with all the contributions they did, they made the terrible mistake to think that it was not important to decipher the Maya writing, because the Maya writing was just prayers or metaphors for religious purposes, and they never imagined that the Maya writing was real history, social and political history. So they say that because as they couldn't do it, they couldn't decipher, it was a good excuse to cover their own path, no? But so they that's the argument they said. So when they reconstructed this stair, they disassembled the stairs and they put it back in a different order. So they scrambled the whole inscription. So for many years we couldn't read it. But it was until recent that David Stewart, he was the son of Gene Stewart, who was the archaeologist for National Geographic. So he was in the field since he was 6 or 8 years old. He dressed as a Lackawanna Indian in that time. And he began at a very young age to learn about all these things. So he became, at age 28 or so, one of the most important epigraphers. He studied with my teacher, with Linda Schiele also, and he devoted his career to this. So it took him about 15 years of work using computers to do all the permutations of the... If you would do by hand this scramble that Thompson and Morley did, you will try to fix that by hand, that probably will take 30 or 50 years if you can do it. But now with computer programs, you can quickly say, okay, what happened if I put this here? Here. And then through that kind of quick permutation system. It took him about 15 years, and now you can read this stairs. They accommodated the stairs. And that was only possible because they knew how to read the inscriptions, and also they have known how the style of writing the Mayas had, so they could see that there were certain fixed sentences that they repeated in all the cities. So that facilitated because they put those pieces first, so they you just needed to fill the blanks with a lot of complications. So this is the so-called hieroglyphic stairway of Copan. The most beautiful stele that represents kings, in the back of the stele there is written the history of each individual king of the stele. City of Yaxchilan, this is now the Usumacinta style in Chiapas. You can see the difference. The temples here are not as vertical, they are more horizontal, because the scale of the Usumacinta and Palenque styles is a more human scale. They are inviting the gods to come to earth, and it's not the human that is going to the sky to see them. You see the difference? It's a different theological approach. So this is Temple 33. The lintels of Yaxchilan were found in this part. These are the lintels of the building, so they created some stories there, so when people entered the building they could see when was dedicated the building, by whom, because the individuals appear there, and there were some stories told there. So some of the most beautiful lintels are this one. Unfortunately, the most beautiful lintels of Yaxchilan were taken or stolen, however you prefer to use the word, by Alfred Maudsley. Alfred Maudsley was an English guy who came to visit this area in 1900s, and he liked it so much, so what he did, he cut the lintels like this thick. They were too heavy, so he basically sliced them just to get the frontal part, and he took them by ship to England. So if you want to see them, you need to go to the British Museum to see them now, where that has been for more than 100 years. They never travel to any international exhibition that comes to Mexico because they will be confiscated here. So the British Museum never lends those pieces when an exhibition is going to pass to Mexico, because there is a kind of an arrest order for those pieces, no? They are captured there, no? But these pieces are some of the most interesting pieces to understand Maya culture. For example, here we have a ruler. We can read this and know who is who. This is a ruler called Shield Yawer, who has a torch, see, that tells that this scene is happening by night. He's illuminating the room with his torch. In the moment that his wife, called Lady Shock, X-O-C, I will explain this word later, Shock, she is doing a bloodletting ritual. She's passing a rope through her tongue, can you see? And the rope has stingray spines in it to produce a bigger bleeding. And the blood is dropping into this container with paper, and after that they burned that paper that was a kind of an incense, an offering of incense into the gods. She entered into a hypnotical trance to invoke the ancestors to come and legitimize their political actions. That can be seen here. You see, Lady Shock in this trance state is invoking an ancestor who is being brought by this snake. You can see the snake. The ancestor is coming out and she can communicate with the ancestor. This is called the vision serpent. That is this kind of umbilical cord that links the sky with the earth and brings the communication between the supernaturals and the Maya rulers. So this is, again, I can explain you all this because we know how to read those things. Otherwise I will tell you, Lintel 25 Yaxchilan, beautiful, no? Next. But now we figure out what is there. I don't explain more because when I go into the, I will go out to tell you a little bit how the inscriptions were read, and I will use some examples like this. This is the Acropolis of Bonampak. In this city here, they found the most amazing paintings produced by the classic Maya. Those paintings have to do, there are 3 rooms within that building, and these represent a ceremony and a festival made when the heir to the throne of Bonampak was born. When the baby was born, King Changwan, who was the current king, he made these celebrations to celebrate the coming of his son, who will be the heir to the Bonampak throne. So you can see all the pageantry, musicians there, and the noble peoples from all the different towns attending the ceremony. It was for ceremonies, the Mayas, like many other Mesoamericans, went to capture enemies and sacrifice them, the enemies, as an offering for fertility, for good luck, for different type of things. And then you can see here are the captives. Some of them are dripping. You can see how this image is so amazing that this was built in about 850, was painted. And this is more than 1,000 years old. Well, it took him 3 years to remove the rubble, and in 1952 he discovered the tomb of King Pakal, who was built exactly in the place where the surface of the earth goes into the underworld, in the center of the pyramid inside. And this was the first body, the first tomb found inside of the pyramid in the American continent, 1952. So, because before that date, it was believed that only the Egyptians utilized the pyramids as funerary shrines, and the Mesoamerican pyramids were only temples. But now that demonstrates, because after 1952, the archaeologists began to excavate the underneath pyramids, and they began to find in every single pyramid a tomb. So it was a constant practice. And this is the tomb found inside. This is the sarcophagus, the body of King Pakal. You can see that the cavity of the tomb has the shape of a uterus, like a female uterus. Because the idea is that in the same way you come out from the uterus of the world, the uterus of the earth, when you die, you come back, you return to the uterus of the earth. And there is this slab, this stone, that is amazing because it contains an image of King Pakal descending into the underworld, being swallowed by the maw of the earth monster. And in the moment he's being swallowed by the earth monster, behind him appears a tree of life emerging, representing the death that produces the resurrection of the tree of life, the death that produces fertility. So they are equating the human cycle to the agricultural cycle of corn. That's why the kings were covered with jade ornaments, because they were dressed as the ever young corn god, the maize god, the corn god. Okay? So that is what happens there. Linda Schiele, my mentor, was the first one who could read all the genealogy of this guy, because all the kings that came before him are located here with her names. So she could read all of this, she could interpret these tombstones and find that this guy was called Pakal. Because before that they call it ruler 8. It's much nicer to know that he was Pakal, like we call someone John Smith and not Mr. T or Mr. 2. No, this is much more realistic. This is the palace of the kings of Palenque. It's an amazing space with several patios and and corridors. It's a very complex architecture. There are even steel beds. The stone beds that the kings use are still there. Okay, I'm going to skip this part. This is Chichen Itza. That is probably one of the most well-known sites. Tulum, also very well-known and beautiful because it's located in the seaside of Quintana Roo. But these are just examples of the other Maya styles. But now, in the second part, to conclude my talk, I want to show you what was the process of decipherment of the Maya hieroglyphic writing. Because this is one of the greatest intellectual adventures of the 20th century. It took 150 years for scholars to figure out how to find or to break the code. These are the Maya areas. You can see all these kind of shaded areas are areas where some of the different Maya languages are spoken. They are distributed in that way. And there are 31 Maya languages, all of them coming from a Proto-Mayan language that was spoken before 2000 BC. And they began to fragment, to divide, until they became the 31 languages of today. Some of those languages are spoken only by 300 people, so those languages are going to die. So the linguists are documenting all these languages before they die, so we can have an ethnological record of those. There are other languages that will never die, like Quiché, Cachiquel, Yucatec, because they are spoken by millions of people, and now there are government programs to preserve them. So, but the ones spoken by communities lost in the jungle are probably going to disappear because the indigenous people are always threatened by the westernization. And the only way to get out of isolation is if they learn Spanish and they can communicate. So eventually, the younger generations, when they learn Spanish, they begin to lose the practice of the old languages. And unfortunately, some of these are going to disappear. Okay, let me go back a little bit of history. There are 3 Maya books only that have been found. They are called by the names of the cities where they are kept today. One is called the Dresden Codex, is in Dresden, Germany, the Paris Codex, and the Madrid Codex. There was found another portion of another Maya manuscript that Michael Coe thinks can be original, but most people are not very convinced, so we never include it in our discussions. It's called the Grolier Codex. But so we only speak about the 3 ones who are fully understood and fully demonstrated their authenticity. The Dresden Codex was found in the library of Dresden in 1739. Suddenly someone identifies it. This is a book about a very weird old culture, what happened here. Okay? So then the scholars began to study it. There was a scholar called Paul Schelhas, who these figures that you see here, these drawings, are images of the gods that appear there. With other chronicles written by missionaries in Yucatan, they describe the gods and tell the attributes that each god has. So then he, watching at the figures and the attributes or the attire that the gods have, he began to identify them. Okay, and he put them letters. God A, God B, God C, God D, because they didn't know how to call them. There is the name, you see. Each god had their names next to it. But they didn't know how to read it, so Paul Schelhas identified the gods, saying God A has these attributes and is equivalent to these other gods spoken as the god of lightning or the god of whatever that the missionaries speak about. The amazing thing is that all the identifications that Schelhas did were perfect. The only thing that was lacking was the name of the god. But he was very brilliant in putting together all the descriptions of this god. Well, since the 19th century, a French priest called Charles Brasseur de Bourbourg, this guy was a parish priest in a Quiche town in Guatemala. He spoke Spanish and Quiche Maya, and he found in one of his trips to Madrid a manuscript written by Bishop Diego de Landa, who was the Bishop of Yucatan in 1560. And he burned all the sacred books of the Mayas, but in order to have a memory of who the Mayas were, he interviewed some of the Mayas and he wrote a book about the life of the Mayas. In one of the pages of the book comes this page. This is the Rosetta Stone to decipher the Maya hieroglyphs. What he did was, he got an informant called Gaspar G and said, okay, Gaspar, sit there. I am going to recite the letters of my alphabet, and as I recite them, you need to write those letters in your language. You write it, no? So he said, A, no? The letter A. And Gaspar G wrote these three hieroglyphs called A. Then he said B, that is the letter D. And he wrote this. And so on, no? He said C, that is the letter C, and Gaspar G using C, he wrote it. Landa said D, and the guy didn't write anything. It means that they didn't have that letter, D. No? So you see there is no D. And so the informant was writing the hieroglyph corresponding to each of the letters. Father Brasseur de Bourbourg had this, he knew Quiche and Spanish, so he had all the elements necessary to have deciphered the hieroglyphs. It was 1860. He couldn't do it. He was a very brilliant guy, but he couldn't do it. All his decipherments were inconsistent, and there was no meaning. They didn't make sense. Other scholars tried after Brasseur de Bourbourg. They went again to this page and tried. Everybody failed. The story comes to the Second World War. During the Second World War, as you know, when the Soviet Union was invaded by the Germans, besides the regular army that the Soviet Union had, the Red Army, they needed to recruit soldiers from all the territories, including scientists. Everybody went to war. It was a defense, kind of a life or death war, as you know. So people like the writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote that famous book Gulag Archipelago and became Nobel Prize of Literature, he was a nuclear scientist, nuclear physicist. He went to the front. There was a linguist of the University of Leningrad called Yuri Norosov. He was a specialist in Egyptian writing. He was an Egyptologist, but linguistic. He went as a soldier. He was almost killed twice in action, but he came with the Red Army to Berlin. And in Berlin, in the library of Berlin that was in flames, was burning, his instinct as a scholar, he dropped his rifle, ran, opened the box, got 2 or 3 books, put them in his bag, recovered his rifle and continued shooting, and continued until the end of the war. When he came back to Leningrad, and he was again teaching and doing research in the University of Leningrad, he got from his backpack his books, and realized that one of the books he got was a facsimilar copy of the Dresden Codex, one of the main Maya books. And the guy said, oh, what a curious language. He was an Egyptologist and a linguist. So he said, let me try, what is this? No? So he began to investigate for 8 years. And he found the key to the decipherment. So in 1953, that was the year that Stalin died, and as you know, was very, very restrictive for Russians to go out the country. He asked permission to the government, and with a lot of difficulties, they allowed him to go to Copenhagen in Denmark to give his lecture about this discovery during the International Conference of Latin Americanist Scholars. So Norosov came, and in an audience like this size, that had all the most important Mayanists and Mesoamericanists of the world at the time, he presented his decipherment of the Mayan writing. And Eric Thompson, that archaeologist that I mentioned to you, who said that the glyphs were just a bunch of religious prayers and nothing else, but he was the god of Maya archaeology. He stood up and said, "We shouldn't believe this bastard Russian," he said that, "because this is just Soviet propaganda, because they want to show that they are superior to us. But this idiot has never put a foot in the Maya area. How he can come here and tell us what to do? When I have spent 30 years of my life there." Norosov was so frustrated and so angry with insult that he immediately left the audience and left the room. But in the audience there was a guy called David Kelly, who was a graduate student at Harvard, and he said, "I think this bastard Russian is right." So then he got out of the room and following the corridor Norosov and said, "Dr. Norosov, can I have a copy of your paper because it's so interesting?" Norosov looked at Kelly and said, "Muchacho, take it." So he gave his own original paper. He said, "Take it. These idiots didn't believe it, but you make sense of it." So he left. He never talked again about hieroglyphs, but he had discovered the methodology that was in that paper. Kelly, well, let me tell you, I had the opportunity to meet Norosov in person. He was very old, probably in his 90s when I met him. He traveled with a nurse. I think he never married. And he had one of the sharpest looks I have ever seen, very stern look. And he traveled with an Angora cat. So he was in the conferences with his Angora cat, and he was caressing the cat and watching at you like this. You talk to him and he just look at you without saying anything. He spoke like 10 languages, but all of them half and half. You know? So then it was difficult to communicate with him, but at that point he didn't talk too much. But so he gave to Kelly. Kelly was studying in Harvard, and one of his classmates was the very, very famous American Mayanist called Michael Coe, that I'm sure you have heard that name. Michael Coe was married to a Russian woman. Michael Coe and Sophie Coe, they together wrote one of the most beautiful books about the history of chocolate. So I recommend you that book. It's called The True History of Chocolate. And by the way, I am organizing, and Michael Coe is 83. He just came from Tanzania, from a safari. And I am organizing him a conference in his honor in my university in Cal State, Los Angeles in April. So I can give you all the information later, because it will be the event of the century, because several of his students who are very prominent Mayanists today are going to speak there. We are bringing people from Guatemala, from Mexico, from all the different areas to honor this guy who was one of the giants of archaeology, in that area. But this guy, his wife, the Russian, translated Norosov's paper, and so Kelly could put it in English and study. And after a few years, he said, "The damn Russian was right." But Thompson continued doing boycott against that. So Thompson said, "David Kelly, you're going to ruin your career. You are too young and you are believing the wrong path. Don't follow that, follow the mainstream." David Kelly, that, thanks God, was a dreamer, was a very, very unorthodox guy. He followed Norosov, and he was the one who brought into the Palenque Round Table in 1973, all those materials, and shared it with Linda Chile and Michael Cole, all the people who were there, and that's how the second part of the decipherment started. Because Noroso discovered the methodology and he only made a few translations. But it was necessary to continue that work to really understand all the texts. And that was the part made by the American scientists. But everybody now recognizes that Noroso is the father of the decipherment of the Maya writing. Why Noroso could, I will try to finish with this, and then I will finish with this, and then a few comments about it, 2012, and then we will finish. And we may have a few minutes for questions. But how Noroso could crack the code? Why the others before him couldn't? The reason is this. The Mayas don't have alphabet. They have syllabary. When Landa said B, the letter B, the Maya was not writing the character for the letter B. He was writing the character for the syllable B-E, B. You understand? Not B, not letter B by itself. The consonant B and the vowel E, B. And that was the problem. So Noroso figured out that, and then he began to put together syllables that produce words that make sense. What he did, first of all, he isolated the Maya characters of Landa, and you see, what Landa thought was the letter B is the syllable B, syllable C, and so on, no? K, C, C-A, K, Q, etc. So he isolated those, and then there is the writing is written in the monuments, but it's also written in the books. And the books have more stylization. So he put, for example, here, this is the way this is written in the monuments in stone. This is the carving, and this is the written by hand in the books. So then this is Ma, the syllable Ma, in the monument, in stone you find it like this, and in the book like this. So he was preparing the land. Now, let's see how exactly, with one example, he could do this. He went to the Dresden Codex, the one he found in Berlin, and he said, okay, here is a drawing that shows a dog. There was a dog, and next to the dog was these glyphs here. So he said, okay, this is the drawing of the god. These glyphs here next to it should be the word dog in that language. So he went to a Maya Spanish dictionary and looked for the word for dog. And he discovered that the word for dog was Zul, T-Z-U-L, Zul. He said, I have this from Landa already. In Landa was this syllable, but it was not this one. So he said, but if it's called Zul, and this is the L, then this one is Zul. So you see, he found a new syllable based in how you say dog in Maya, and he completed the particle Zu was the one missing because he had the L, the Lu here. Then he continued reading the book, and he came with the image of a turkey. And he saw that turkey had this symbol here. And he said, I know already this because this is Su in the word for dog. And this one, Ku, is in Landa, in the book of Landa. So he already had the two hieroglyphs so he could read. So he checked, and yes, this is Ku, that he had it in Landa, Ku, and this is Su. So the word is Kutsu, because you put together the two syllables, Ku and Su. But in the dictionary, it was read as Kuts. So then he realized that the Mayas put together two syllables and they dropped the last vowel to make a more compact word. So they don't pronounce kutsu to refer to Turkey, they say kuts. But it's formed by the syllable ku and su, and then they drop the last one. So with these findings, he brought a few more examples, and all of them were consistent. In all the cases, the letters have the same value, so you need the consistency to demonstrate something like this. And that's what he presented in Copenhagen, that he was called Bastard Russian for this. But that Bastard Russian is the father of the disciple, because he was right at the end, without putting a foot in the Maya area. And finding the Dresden Codex in the last days of the Second World War in the burning Berlin Library. I always tell my students, we don't choose the books choose us. The books come to the right hands always, because they come to the hands where there will be some use, no? And some meaning for that. Okay, well, just to finalize my talk, what happened with the so-called 2012? Well, first of all, the Mayas never said that the war was going to finish. Sorry that I disillusioned you so quickly, but even the war can still end, even without the Maya saying, don't worry. But if we push the wrong nuclear button, we can destroy it tonight. We don't need to wait until December 21st. No? We have the capability to destroy it now. But the point here is the Mayas in some of their cities had inscriptions who said that in the equivalent of year of our calendar called 2012, there will be the ending of the 14th Baktun. The Baktuns are periods of 400 years. So the Mayas counted with cycles of 400 years. So they put their creation date in the year 3012 before Christ. Why they chose that date? Don't ask me. But they decided that the beginning of the world happened in a date that is equivalent to 3012. Then, in 2012, we'll complete a period of 5,000 years from that starting date of year zero that is equivalent to our 3012. So the only thing the Mayas said is that a cycle of 5,000 years is going to end 2012, and people who were very good for marketing began to write books and said, hey, that's the doomsday, and there was no other indication, scientifically speaking, about that. The point is how we interpret that. No? I tell my students, the world is not going to disappear or to collapse only because the Mayas said or didn't say it. There will be other mechanisms in which we can be responsible to destroy the world, destroying the ecology, destroying water systems, everything, or creating biological weapons, or those kind of things, we know. But to me and the Mayas, for the Mayas, every time a cycle finished, they made special ceremonies to open the new cycle. So to me, as well as the Mayas, we need to see this cycle as a renewal, the opportunity to create a better civilization. We have a civilization that is coming to horrible streams today. We have a civilization that has been corrupted so much, has had tremendous advancements in science, but very little advancements in humanity. It's very sad, but it's the truth. The tremendous advancements in science have been more advanced for destruction than for construction. So it's the opportunity for humanity to make a reflection and say, hey, we can start another cycle of 5,000 years with a new philosophy, a new look of things, a new a renewed spirituality and try to find a better sense of our lives. That's the way I interpret that, instead of trying to see it in the most destructive and pessimistic way of a destruction of the world. Because the destruction of the world depends on us in some ways, or depends on an asteroid that crashes with us. But we can construct with optimism a better civilization, to find new models of coexistence between peoples, of collaboration between countries, collaboration between regions of the world, and to find better ways to be human beings. So that's my thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.